Salutations. With this particular fireside, I'm going to direct this at an audience that in all likelihood has no idea that I exist and would outright reject any mere mention of the terms socialism and communism. I direct this to the people who have voted for Trump and who typically vote against the Democratic Party. Republicans. I would like to express that while we may not agree with economic policies 100%, I'm here to tell you that as someone who embraces dialectical materialism and economic Marxism, unlike certain individuals running around today who label themselves as trained Marxists, but have no clue or an inkling of a clue as to how Marxism operates. I am not your enemy. We are not your enemy. In fact, we understand your frustration and anger with how liberals are running this country and all of our major urban centers, and how liberals are weaponizing past historical injustices, which I will address, to push the agenda of special interest groups, lobbyists, and corporate entities wrapped in the facade of progressivism and social justice. Conservatives, I mean this with great sincerity. Out of all the things that annoy me about your talking heads, the late Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, to an extent Anderson Cooper, Ann Coulter, the thing that annoys me the most about your talking heads is how Republicans will constantly trash China because they wrongfully perceive that the Communist Party of China is to be on par with Western liberalism, and how they think the Communist Party of China runs China like how the Democratic Party runs the United States. How ignorant. The Communist Party of China does not run China like how the Democratic Party runs the United States. Fox News and One American News does not really understand how the Communist Party of China operates. Let's review some things in terms of what the DNC does not do and what the Communist Party of China does. The Democratic National Committee, the DNC, does not execute 14 billionaires within 8 years and redistributes their assets to develop infrastructure for common interest. The DNC doesn't advance programs that convert privately owned golf courses in Hong Kong into housing for the homeless. The DNC does not create an artificial sun and becomes the global leader in being the first to harness the power of nuclear fusion technology. The DNC doesn't lift 800,000 people out of poverty. The DNC doesn't implement social credit scores that are used to keep the citizenry of the United States in line, ensuring that there would be law and order in the United States. But social credit scores, that's Orwellian. You know what? It might be Orwellian, but listen, but hear me out. China doesn't have a bunch of confused kids calling themselves Antifa and knocking down every statue they see every time there's an overly sensationalized police-related murder in the media. You don't see the youth of China, dressing in all black and acting all, angsty and outraged, trying to knock down statues of Mao Zedong, do you? No, you don't. The DNC doesn't have the brass to tell Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, and the World Economic Forum that you are not the boss of us. No, that's something that a communist party would do, not the DNC. Not Bernie Sanders, not AOC, not Nancy Pelosi, not Kamala Harris, and definitely not Brandon. They are not communists, and they never were communist, because they work on behalf of selling this country out to the 1% oligarchs who meet in Davos. So conservatives, you would do very well to understand that supply-side free market economics, better known as Reaganomics, isn't going to save you or this country from the mess that this country is presently in at this time. You speak of the United States You speak of wanting the United States to be great again. Okay. Your skewed perception of great is derivative from a time period where there was an industrial middle class, when this country was the world's leading producer of manufactured goods. It was a time when labor unions, protected by the government, could wield serious power to shut down the economy in case the bosses got a little out of hand. It was during a time when one source of income could purchase a home, a car, support a family of 3, and, one could also purchase a Super Bowl ticket. Their team made it. Back then it was normally, the Steelers, but still. It was a time when a person on a minimum wage income could afford an apartment in a city without roommates and could also, buy food to eat without a second job. It was a time when government did its job and maintained public infrastructure owned and paid for by the public. Your roads would be paved, your schools would be maintained, your public water sources would have no lead or fluoride in it, and your health care was relatively affordable. It was a time when college was also relatively affordable. It was a time when, minus the extreme racism, a legacy that we're still coming to grips with today, the cost of living was worth a life to live in the United States. Communism did not take your American dream away from you. No. The free market did. J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Budweiser, Disney, Exxon, Walmart, Nike, Hershey, Nestle, American Express, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Amazon, Starbucks, all the companies that you label as so-called globalist, woke, left-wing companies, they are responsible for the present state of affairs in this country in 2022. They got wealthier and more powerful at the expense of our country, our communities, and our lives. The free market took your American dream away from you, because to the free market, your entire existence solely exists to be commodified and exploited for the sake of profit. And if you try to compete with the free market, if you try to form your own business or your own co-op or your own intentional community, the 1% oligarchy will do whatever it takes to strip you of owning the modes and means of your own productive forces. And they will destroy you because the government lacks a spine to stand up to the oligarchs and protect you and protect this country from them. In a way, Ronald Reagan was right. Government is the problem because over the past 40 some odd years, the United States federal government, in a bipartisan effort, both Republicans and Democrats, has done less and less to protect you and less to protect this country and this country's public interest from Wall Street and Silicon Valley, and has instead enabled 1% oligarchs to monopolize our lands, our natural resources, seize our homes, gentrify our cities, inflate prices, outsource productive forces, deflate wages, monopolize modes and means of production, information, communication, education, and make our lives vastly more expensive and vastly more miserable. Yes, you are well in your outrage. You are well justified in your outrage at the Democratic Party of today. But your outrage is misdirected. And the one thing the liberals are more terrified of than Donald Trump becoming president again, more terrified of that, yep. They are absolutely terrified of people like me talking to you folks and somehow convincing you that it's time to embrace proactive government solutions and use the power of the federal government to break corporate America and Silicon Valley in half. This is a sentiment that is expressed by true adherents of Marxism. We do not support a singular global government that is ran by and for the benefit of private, corporate, and aristocratic interests. You would do well to understand that our alignment as socialists and communists, at least those of us who take it seriously, does not align with Western liberalism. Socially, while we embrace a society that treats all with fairness, tolerance, and we support the idea of social egalitarianism, we do not embrace a society that encourages division based on racial and sexual prejudice. And we do not embrace a society that exploits past injustices as a means to divide the public among itself for the sake of atomizing our community and our country in the name of corporate profit motives. We also do not embrace a society that condemns people living in the present for the actions of a more ignorant and barbaric past. At present, this is the modus operandi of Western liberalism. Western liberalism is not communism and never has been communist. Get it through your head. At present, it would be well for Republicans to understand that those of us who are sincerely socialist and communist are beyond discontented beyond discontent and fed up with the Democratic Party and liberalism. We are fed up. The nerve of these hypocrites who say they're overly concerned about defending democracy when, not for nothing, Brandon was a direct beneficiary of Citizens United, the Supreme Court ruling that allocated corporations legal personhood and granted them the power to influence the outcome of elections and the messaging of elections, drowning out our legitimate democratic process with their blood money. The liberals shrieked about January 6th. Oh my goodness, it was an attempted coup on democracy! When in truth, the coup happened a very long time ago, and they did absolutely nothing about it. Remember Occupy Wall Street? This is an issue that we raised, and you scoffed at us, and the liberals ignored us, but hopefully now, you conservative folks are willing to listen now. Our reasons for being discontent with the Democrats are a little bit different from your reasons, but hear us out. The Democratic Party is not the party of the working class anymore. They are the party of elitist 1% oligarchs. They are the party of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jamie Dimon, the Walton family, and the Rockefeller family. They are the party of technocrats tied to big pharma, big tech, big finance, and big media. The Democratic Party overturned Glass-Steagall, a wall of separation between commercial banking and private banking. They enacted NAFTA, outsourcing our industrial capacity. That's why a lot of people don't have jobs. They have made welfare virtually non-existent for the most needy of our citizens. They raise tolls, but roads never get fixed. They raise taxes, and for what? Not so the public can be reimbursed with the state-of-the-art infrastructure, no, but to be burdened to pay for more wars, to keep the world safe for democracy, and to allocate economic development subsidies to the oligarchs who take our tax money that belongs to our country to pocket it away in offshore tax havens in Panama and Grand Cayman. Yes, you are being taxed too much, but it's not going to socialism, it's going to capitalists. The Constitution means absolutely nothing to these interests who believe it is their destiny to co-opt the United States. They seek to silence you when you say, I dissent. They seek to disarm you so you cannot defend your private interests and our common interests from being sold to the highest bidder. They believe that you are uneducated, uncivilized, rabble who do not deserve better living and working conditions. And yet, while they do this, they feign progressivism. They'll run AOC, or they'll run Kamala Harris. They'll run who historically marginalized, folks. Yeah, but they're not acting functionally on their behalf. No, they're acting on behalf of capital. As if they're supposedly creating a more equitable society that embraces racial and sexual tolerance, while millions of people of all races and genders slip through the cracks and are losing their economic agency. Most disappointingly, the Democratic Party has become the party of Ronald Reagan. Their anti-Russian rhetoric echoes rhetoric that designates Russia as the evil empire, and rhetoric that has once upon a time ago, and could potentially once more, bring civilization to the brink of nuclear holocaust. And for what? For what? So Wall Street and London can make their push to monopolize trade and resources within the Eastern Hemisphere? Is that it? Is that really it? Is that the reason why the Democratic Party shut down, the Keystone XL pipeline, so Wall Street can control petroleum and minerals in nations that are resisting their influence? I wonder. The Democratic Party is not the party of China. They don't work for China. They're the party of Wall Street, and they're the party of Ronald Reagan. But this time, instead of hiding behind the American flag and Christian fundamentalism, they hide behind social justice to divert public attention away from how they're selling out our country to private interests. So I'm proposing that the Republican Party embrace... Am I proposing that the Republican Party suddenly embraces communism to defeat this menace of neoliberalism? Idealistically, that would be great. But realistically, the Republican Party embracing the ideology of Lenin? That's probably not going to happen. However, what the Republican Party can do, and should do, is do some deep soul searching and go back to its early roots. The Republican Party under Lincoln spearheaded the effort to end involuntary servitude down south, and they allocated undeveloped lands for urban dwellers to homestead for free. Doesn't that sound a little bit like socialism? Yeah. The GOP under James Garfield, who I personally regard as the most underrated president in American history, only serving 8 months due to an assassination. Well, they imposed civil service reforms, purging corruption out of the post office and other government institutions. They went after political bosses in both parties. They drove the first Ku Klux Klan into hiding and proposed a publicly funded universal education system to educate the children of the formerly enslaved. The GOP under Theodore Roosevelt created the Food and Drug Administration, make sure that, we're not being poisoned by corporations. They sided with unions when workers sought higher pay and an 8-hour workday, created conservation programs that set aside tens of millions of acres of pristine land from being privatized and commercialized. Most importantly, the GOP under the Roosevelt administration used the power of the state to break up the monopolistic combinations of Standard Oil, U.S. Steel, and J.P. Morgan at a time when robber barons were running wild and without any impunity. The GOP on local levels sought to implement rent controls to prevent price gouging of working-class citizenry. They also sought to prevent bad faith actors from preying upon the naivety of immigrants when arriving on U.S. shores. During the Eisenhower administration, the GOP used the power of the state to desegregate public schools, ensure that employers were honoring union contracts and paying workers fairly, and develop the most intricate interstate highway system in existence at the time. If you're still not convinced that communism is the answer, at least understand that the standard operational procedure for the Republican Party is effectively broken and effectively adopted by the Democratic Party, who now openly embrace Ronald Reagan's supply-side economic theory and foreign policy, coinciding with a very distorted perversion of critical race theory and intersectional theory, which literally has nothing to do with Marxism or bringing the working class together to fight the oligarchy. If this country, our economy, and our society is to become relatively stable again, the Republican Party has to ditch the Cold War nonsense and free market libertarian nonsense and re-embrace the economically progressive principles that were advanced by Lincoln, Garfield, Roosevelt, LaGuardia, and Eisenhower as a means to reestablish equilibrium between common interest and private interest. The days of Ronald Reagan and the Bush family in the Republican Party are over. They are over. Reaganism is the reason why our country is in the wretched state that it is in right now. The Republican Party in the 21st century would do well to make it their priority to reform corrupt police departments to ensure that no one is unjustly murdered by corrupt police, and free handouts to big box stores and corporate chains that destroy our communities and privatize our common interests, and bailouts of corporations, resort to diplomacy instead of banging the war drums as a first solution, strip lands from Marathon Oil, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and redistribute them back to the indigenous, and repatriate small farmers who had the rug pulled out from underneath them. They should also redevelop our productive capacities and see to it that anyone who wants a job, and there are plenty of people who want jobs, but they can't get one, maybe they should, ensure that anyone who wants a job can get one, and with a living wage. Enforce price controls to prevent the oligarchs from price gouging and, inflation. Crack down and punish interests who resort to offshore banking, reinvest in our dilapidated infrastructure for the benefit of the public and not private corporations, and mitigate the influence of big real estate and big oil, which makes life unaffordable for hardworking people who work 2 to 3 jobs to survive just to give their money away to parasitic oligarchs who skate around their tax obligations and more or less try to circumvent our public common interest. That is what the Republican Party should be and could be if America is to be, quote unquote, great again. The Republican Party needs at the very least to become structurally, not superficially, progressive again, if you won't embrace full-on socialism. You can still keep your guns. You can still keep your religious values and traditions. Nobody wants to tell you how to live or what to believe, especially those of us who, call ourselves socialist. But you have to be honest with yourselves that whatever you thought was working before is not working right now. And it is holding this country back from achieving its true potential. You shouldn't feel the need to beat China. You should feel the need to be better than China. If they can develop a primitive artificial sun, why can't the United States develop a better one? Why can't the United States lift 80 million people out of poverty instead of, 800,000? Why can't the United States be the leader in manufacturing and be the leader in quality of life once more? We can be. We can be. But if the Democratic Party refuses to adopt these concepts and continues to sell our common and national interests off to private multinational corporate interests, perhaps the Republican Party should, if Republicans and conservatives come to their senses and realize that the way forward is making what was old new again. It's not that we do not need government, more so as we need an effective government that proactively works to protect the common interest and our national interests from mass privatization and allows the working class to have agency once more. We socialists and communists, at least the real ones, not these fake AOC people, do not expect you to fully embrace all of our economic doctrines. but we expect you to get your act together, since the Democratic Party refuses to do so. But if you're sincere about defeating the so-called 1% quote-unquote globalists, then maybe you should listen to those of us who have been fighting these interests long before they became a blip on your radar. So we offer you a truce. If you take these proposals into consideration, we are not enemies, but we share a common enemy who must be defeated if we are to both attain our ideals for a better society. In short, the message is plain and simple. The terms are plain and simple. Republicans, make the Republican Party progressive, structurally progressive again. That is what we ask, and we will consider meeting you halfway. That is all. This is Comrade Pella, signing out.